Hi, everyone. We're going to give it a minute just to let the Zoom populate and to let the YouTube link populate. And once we're live, we'll start the dispatch. Looks like we are now live on YouTube. So we are all good to get going. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, and welcome to another live recording of Trump's Trials and Tribulations, New York Trial Dispatch. Today is Thursday, May 2nd, and I'm joined by courts correspondent and legal fellow Anna Bauer, managing editor Tyler McBrien, and editor-in-chief Benjamin Wittes. So to start off with what everybody wants to know, what was the line situation like this morning?
Well, I got a great language lesson actually this morning from one of our German colleagues in the line, who was explaining to an American reporter behind me the word for hush money in German, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing this okay, Schweigegeld. And this that German reporter then said, it actually sounds much better in hush money now that I say it in English as hush money now that I say it. And then the reporter went on to ask how you say some other key vocabulary of the case, one being porn star, which in German is porno star. And then he thought for a moment, he said, or you could say, and this one I'm going to butcher, sex film Erwachsene, translated to sex film adult.
Although if my very crude German is correct, it would really that would be the genitive case of adult, and so it would be like sex film of the adult or the adult sex film, which is actually really similar to the English. But I just made up some German to say that. So if it's wrong, don't blame me.
And then also a shout out to a French reporter in the press room who taught me that in French it's pot de vin, which is pot of wine, which is a good bribe to me.
And Anna and Ben, any language lessons in the line you guys were in, or nothing too exciting this morning?
Nothing too exciting this morning, although I will say I got there to the reserve press line, which is the line that goes into the courtroom itself. And what you do is you go up and you say, I'm Anna Bauer from Lawfare, and the police officer will check you off for your organization. That's the one spot that you get in the courtroom. And this morning when I went up, he said, oh, well, someone already checked in for Lawfare. But I called Ben and Tyler and they were in the other line. So if there is a lawfare imposter out there, then we will find you. But no, I ended up being able to get in, and I'm not sure. I think there was just a miscommunication.
No, if there is a lawfare imposter out there, join us on Friday's live stream because we have a lot of questions and we wanna give you some scotch and make sure that you're holding up your end of the bargain. We're very into imposters and frauds here in the town of Anna Delvey. And so, if you're the lawfare fraud, we want you on the show tomorrow. I got to tell you my little moment from the line today. Best protester yet. The guy shows up with a big cross, but it's an Orthodox cross. It's got the slant, and it's wrapped in thorns. And in one hand, and he's got a giant bell in the other hand, and he's walking down the street, and the bell, which is the Liberty Bell, I don't know why, is ringing really loudly, and he's blessing everybody with the cross and stops in front of the courthouse to stand there. And the back of his shirt says America's three great presidents, George Washington, John F. Kennedy, Donald Trump. And so whether this was a religious demonstration, a pro-Trump demonstration, whether it was about the courts, whether it was about blessing us, really not sure, but I got a great picture of him. I think Tyler may have tweeted it, and he's my protester of the day.
A number of lawfare people who I'm muted.
No, you're not muted.
Oh.
I just unmuted you.
Oh, I think you. Oh,
I
okay.
accidentally muted you and then I unmuted you.
All right, thank you. There are a number of lawfare folks who have come by to say hi to us in the line. So thank you so much, everyone who's done so. That's been really fun.
Well, once you guys tackled the line this morning, court started with a contempt hearing on some alleged gag order violations by Donald Trump. So, Tyler, what happened during the hearing today, and what were the alleged gag order violations that were being discussed?
Yeah, so we started first thing just past 9:30. Ever punctual Justice Merchan came in. We were, as you said, hearing argument regarding 4 additional violations or allegations of violations. And just as a reminder, earlier this week, Trump was held in contempt of court for 9 out of 10 of other violations. And so these additional 4 actually had occurred, I think some of them on the morning of the hearing, but not in the intervening days. So we sort of same thing as last time. We took them one by one. The Justice Merchan was interested in hearing. Basically, the defense was pursuing the same argument that these were responses to political attacks. They're raising the same arguments that the defendant is campaigning for president, and he has to respond to political attacks, and political attacks aren't covered in the gag order. Justice Merchan, I think at this point, his patience is wearing thin with repeated arguments and repeated alleged violations. We started talking about one of them, which I believe was about Michael Cohen. Sorry, pardon me, about David Pecker. This one was on April 25th. Trump was responding to a question. I believe it was just outside the courtroom, and he said about witness David Pecker, quote, "He's been very nice. I mean, David's been very nice, a nice guy." The defense kept talking about this one, and Merchan sort of dispatched with that one. He's like, I'm not really worried about that one. He really wanted to talk about the jurors because there was another allegation in which Trump was discussing jurors, which would be another clear violation of the gag order. It was pretty tense. This was, I believe, Blanche was up for this part of it. He didn't perform that well, I would say. I think he's to be fair, he's facing an uphill battle with these contempt hearings. But if I had to guess, it seems like we may get another 3 fines of $1,000 each, and perhaps dispatching with the one allegation regarding David Pecker. But Ben and Anna, I'm curious if I missed anything there.
Well, I will just say that this is completely non-substantive, but I think one person that Todd Blanche got in trouble with today was his client. There was a scene that was I quite loved, actually. Todd Blanche is trying to balance the world's most difficult client against a relatively impatient, if soft-spoken judge on this point. And the judge makes a point that the facial violation here is pretty obvious. He doesn't say it in those words. And Todd Blanche says from the lectern, "Your Honor, I agree." And Trump just wheels around at him, and like it was really demonstratively responsive. And I would not be entirely surprised if Todd Blanche is not there tomorrow. Trump is reportedly irritated with him, and he was visibly irritated at this moment.
We also had Stephen Weiss there today, who is a defense counsel in some of Trump's other cases. I don't think Stephen Weiss has been there every day of this trial. Is that right?
I haven't seen him, but then again, I don't know. I'm not sure I would notice.
Yeah, so it was just an interesting appearance because I need to check, but I'm fairly certain that it has not been common for Stephen Weiss to be present at the counsel's table.
We also, the defense counsel complained on behalf of Trump that essentially the witnesses themselves are allowed to say whatever they want in public, and Donald Trump is not able to respond. Merchan also had little patience for that. He said, they're not under a gag order. Your client is. We also moved through a few exhibits that the defense had submitted to the court. There were, I think, hundreds of pages of them. We saw a few choice ones from Michael Cohen's, I think, social media feeds, where he had posted a few, I would say, memes of the former president, including his famous, now infamous Von Schützenpants line, which won many a laugh from the press overflow room. It was a rowdy start to the day for the press, I think.
So, one other gag order matter, which is that after lunch, Susan Necklace for Trump brings in, it was some very large number of news articles that this was saying, hey, the former president wants to tweet these out or truth them out, and we don't know if they violate the gag order. So asking for like pre-clearance, it reminded me sort of like a Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act back before the Supreme Court got rid of that. And saying, hey, can you pre-clear these tweets about witnesses and the jury and the that may violate the gag order. And Justice Merchan was not that into this idea and said no, and take me up to the appellate court if you've got a problem with it.
I will say, in slight defense of Necklace's ploy there was a previous moment I'm recalling exactly when Merchan did float a scenario that was something to the effect of, if your client thought that reposts or certain posts were flirting with the edge and he had come to me and asked, Judge, are these okay? Then maybe that would be okay. But he didn't. So that actually, I recalled that point when Necklace was trying this, but it seemed like just the volume of them and that they were in clear violation of the gag order, wore on Merchan. And so he just essentially messaged to the defense, when in doubt, steer clear. When in doubt, steer clear. I think he said 3 times.
And then moving on to kind of what the bulk of the day was. So Ben, I believe this is a witness that you have, I'll say, many opinions about. So who was the first witness of the day?
Well, so, first of all, it is rare that I do a total about face about a witness between day 1 of testimony and day 2, but I'm going to do it here. I violated my own personal rule, which is never to comment authoritatively about a witness before cross-examination is over, or in this case, had really begun. And I described Mr. Keith Davidson, lawyer to not just Karen McDougal, but also Stormy Daniels, as as kind of boring and not living up to his reputation as a total sleazeball scumbag. And boy, did today change that. And under just really expert cross-examination from Emil Bovey, he emerges as one of the great heroes of this case, up there with David Pecker, and more surprising even than David Pecker, because he kind of lulled me into a sense that he was boring. This guy is an unbelievable sleazeball, and I could not love him more. And I'm just going to turn it over to Tyler and Anna to tell you, like, give you the highlights of this day, which was like rapid fire. Like every time you think you'd gotten your hand around it, they'd be like, "Oh, and weren't you behind the Hulk Hogan sex tape? And weren't you behind the?" And he was on the stand bobbing and weaving, and he was arguing about whether statements that he'd issued that are clearly false are true. So I love this guy. He's a great American, and Emil Bove did a really good job taking him apart.
As a millennial woman who grew up with a lot of pop culture, mid-aughts pop culture references, today was truly a throwback, because we got references to Tila Tequila, the reality star. We got the Hulk Hogan sex tape. We got Lindsay Lohan's rehab stint. We got the Charlie Sheen sex scandal. I'm probably missing multiple other scandals that this attorney, Keith Davidson, was involved with, an alleged extortion plot that the FBI did a sting operation for at a hotel. It was all very salacious and scandalous, and Ben Wittes was loving every moment of it.
The man is like the Forrest Gump of 2010's celebrity scandals. He was at the center of it all. It was striking.
And he was monetizing it all. it's like everything you think is like Gawker did this to Hulk Hogan or somebody did this to Lindsay Lohan. No, it's all Keith Davidson brokered, a deal in which so and so did such and such, and he got paid for it.
And
Yeah, and
sorry.
there were a lot of moments in which, this information would come out, and Bove, have we come to a conclusion on how to pronounce his name?
I think it's Bovey.
Bovey, and Bovey, would say, and were you the one who negotiated this deal, or were you was this your client that you were trying to negotiate a deal for the purchase of, you were selling this sex tape, or you were selling this story? And he would consistently say, I do not recall, I do not recall. Right. He ultimately, in some cases, asserted attorney-client privilege, but that's one reason why Ben is saying that he, came across as quite sleazy, because he, is someone who seemed to not recall things that maybe he should, that kind of thing. Although I will say, in his defense, he said that he's had over 1,500 clients in his career, and that many of these episodes were from long ago. But I think the reason that Bove was going down this route of kind of trying to portray him as this like sleazy guy who negotiates the sale of stories and sex tapes for a living, is because he first wants to undermine his credibility with the jury, but also they have this like line of questioning that involves, whether or not this is a guy who has ever tried to extort people in the past, and what he does by making these hush money agreements, in the defense view is, borderline extortion, or in some cases maybe has been extortion. They talked about an investigation and a report by a local authority in Florida, in which Mr. Davidson was allegedly investigated for extortion and that kind of stuff. So what they're trying to do here, I think, is get at this element of intent to defraud, right? Like these falsification of business records have to be done to intend to defraud someone, and the prosecution's theory is that it was done with an intent to commit this other crime that relates to a conspiracy to promote someone to office through unlawful means. So what they're trying to say here is, in the defense view, it wasn't a conspiracy to suppress stories to overturn the election. In fact, what it was is just Trump being cornered by this really aggressive attorney and his client, who were trying to extort them for money, and so that therefore, there is no intent to defraud people, the American people, the voting public, and there is no conspiracy to overturn or unlawfully promote someone, because this is just what any reasonable person would do in these circumstances. Is that right?
So I think that's I think it's one of the theories. I think, look, the defense is working with a number of I would say very malleable clay here. One is that this witness who seemed weirdly wholesome yesterday, they get to spend time taking apart in front of the jury and just peeling away the sleaze levels of the layers of the onion. And that always helps, if you then want to go in front of the jury in closing argument and say, look, the prosecution has relied on this sleazeball and this sleazeball and this sleazeball. And yesterday, this is a guy who's seems apologetic, or Tuesday, about using the phrase estrogen mafia. And today he's, they have him talking about, and he doesn't seem especially apologetic. He's going to celebrities and say, by the way, we don't only do this to celebrities. If we've got some nice family man who's had a few gay trysts, we'll approach them for money too. So, I mean, this is like, whether he's guilty of extortion in a legal sense, this is a guy who's seriously, professionally monetizing other people's pain and the threat of outing it. And so, that one level is just that, that can is that I think they are, the government gets him in order to tell some part of the Michael Cohen story so that they're not relying entirely on Michael Cohen. And if the defense, excuse me, can turn around and say, actually,
Right, Tyler, while we try to
Did
get
we
Ben
lose?
and Anna back, do you have any thoughts on Keith Davidson's cross-examination by Emile Beauvais and his witness testimony this afternoon?
Yeah. I mean, as Ben was just saying, I think he did come across like an unrepentant extortionist in some ways, which helps the defense because there didn't seem to be any mention or forethought as to influencing the election in his actions. I think the closest we came was an exchange between Davidson and Dylan Howard, a text message exchange shortly after the election. Sorry, I think that pardon me, the night of the election, in which Davidson texted Howard, "What have we done?" Which was actually won a giggle from the press. And Davidson clarifies that this was, excuse me, gallows humor on election night when it came up that there was a surprise that Trump was leading and folks were ready to call the election. And then Davidson explained that this was an understanding that our quote, our activities may have in some way assisted the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. But of course, that was retrospective. It was not a foreplanned attempt to influence the election. So I think that was as close as we came to linking the two, which is to say not close at all.
Apologies for our blinking out. I just want to add, before we move on from the talented Mr. Davidson, I just want to point out his most fabulous moment, which was okay. It sounds like my audio is bad.
Yeah, it's a bit scratchy. I did want to mention one more thing about Davidson, which is we also got, I would say, language lessons from him as well. There was one statement that was put up on the screen. This was, I think many listeners will be familiar. It was a statement from Stormy Daniels, which actually Trump truthed recently as if it were new, but this was years ago. I'm finding it now, in which Daniels essentially, it was from January 10th, 2018. This was in which she said, "I recently became aware that certain news outlets are alleging that I had a sexual and/or romantic affair with Donald Trump many, many, many years ago." And it goes on to say that this is false, that there were no hush money payments. And so it's up on the screen, and Beauvais asks, what is the truthfulness of this? Oh, sorry, perhaps it was Steinglass asked, what is the truthfulness of this? And straight-faced Davidson says, completely truthful. Why? Because it depends on how you interpret the words romantic, a relationship, and which he describes as, I think no one would characterize that as romantic, which that would be false. And a relationship suggests some repeated, extended sort of interaction, which again he's saying didn't happen. And then he even took issue with the label of hush money. He said it was not a hush money payment; it was a consideration. And this actually later on sort of, I think, ruffled Beauvais' feathers. This tactic or this style. Beauvais, I think, didn't appreciate being lawyered by the lawyer up there. He called it lawyer games. He was like, "I don't want to play the lawyer games. I just want you to be truthful." And Davidson spat right back. He said, "I am being truthful, sir," which I think was the point when we went into sidebar to maybe lower the temperature a bit. But it was got kind of spicy for a little bit.
Yeah, I was wondering during that moment what because there are two jurors who are lawyers on the jury, and I was wondering what they made of this interaction in which the person doing the cross-examining and then the witness were kind of trying to out-lawyer each other with their technical interpretation of various terms. But one more thing about Davidson's testimony as well is that we got some recordings towards the end. I believe it was on Recross and Redirect. There were some recordings that were introduced into evidence The one that stood out to me was this moment that it involved a recorded phone call that Davidson did not know that Michael Cohen had recorded. It was not entirely clear when this call was recorded, but in the call, Cohen describes Trump as at one point maybe expressing regret about the Daniels deal. Cohen quotes Trump as saying, or Cohen says, I don't know how many times he has told me, he meaning Trump, I hate that we did it. And that it being the Stormy Daniels deal, we meaning Trump and Michael Cohen. And so that is just, a piece of evidence that I think helps to show that Trump maybe had personal involvement in the Stormy Daniels deal, that he, was aware of it. And considered himself, although of course that's going to come out through Michael Cohen and Michael Cohen alone. That was Davidson's impression of what the context of that statement was. But, whenever we do eventually get Michael Cohen coming and testifying, I assume that that's going to be something that the prosecution will ask about. So we'll see.
And then we are coming near the end. And so it sounded like throughout the day, we went from a very exciting first witness to a little bit more of a boring second witness. So Tyler, can you talk about who the second witness was and why it seemed like many people might have been falling asleep listening to his testimony?
I'll first say this is Douglas Doss, who seems like a stand-up guy. He works in the DA's office in a unit called the High Technology Analysis Unit, HTAU. He was giving very technical testimony related to the process by which data is extracted and analyzed from devices, specifically in this case, Michael Cohen's two phones, one of which had about 40,000 contacts, one of which had closer to 400. But as we talked about after, I think 40,000 is about the number that you want your fixer to have as contacts in their phone. Bove went on a pretty long, I think the one thing notable about this was that Bove went on a pretty long line of questioning about the fidelity or the accuracy of data that is extracted through this process. He was calling into question points at which there were risks of perhaps remote manipulation before the device was actually secured in some sort of SCIF-like vault. The witness said, sure, there are points. The risk is pretty low. We weren't quite sure what Bove was angling at because we didn't reach the conclusion, but that was my guess. I don't know if Ben and Anna had a different interpretation.
Yeah, I will just say it is not entirely clear to me. This was, from the government's point of view, a pretty ordinary witness whose main role was to just get certain forensic material into the record, in particular texts with Hope Hicks, which does suggest to me that she will be the next significant witness, by the way. So I was a little surprised when Bove really kind of treated the cross-examination like very differently than he did the cross-examination of, say, the C-SPAN witness or the transcript witness. He really seemed to go after him, and he's not done, on the theory that he wants to poke holes in the forensic work of extraction from these phones. By the way, key word today, extraction, shows up with respect to Davidson extracting money from people. He doesn't like the word extraction, but it actually seems like a good word. And then, of course, forensic extraction from these two phones of Michael Cohen shows up again. So word of the day, extraction. But I do think that what's the significance of what the defense is trying to do here? Not entirely clear to me, but I think it's the following. The first, if you can raise questions, so this clearly isn't about Hope Hicks's text messages to Michael Cohen. It's about the video of the audio of Donald Trump talking to Michael Cohen. And the defense seems to be setting up an argument that not only can you not trust Michael Cohen because he's a perjuring, lying sack of shit, but you also can't trust the audio from his phone because of some capacity for manipulation that happened in the course of the extraction process. And so I think that's the argument that they're setting up.
Yeah,
but
I
it's not
think
clear yet.
I think that's right. I'm actually not surprised that they approach this cross-examination in a different way. The C-SPAN stuff and the E. Jean Carroll deposition that were the subjects of these other two documents, witnesses that we got on Tuesday, those are already things that are, basically public record, things that I think, it's not necessarily the information that was elicited there would be totally damning for Trump anyway. It's facts that maybe the prosecution wants to get into evidence and needs to for other reasons, but they weren't, like this, where it's a secretly recorded conversation in which Trump is saying, that he has some kind of awareness of the AMI reimbursement for the Karen McDougal thing. There's a suggestion, the audio was garbled, but there's a suggestion in the statement of facts from the prosecution that he suggests paying it back in cash. It's stuff that really is not helpful at all for the defense, and it's the kind of thing where I think they're setting up a pretty the kind of thing that a defense attorney would do in this situation where you're trying to make a chain of custody argument, pointing to the fact that the phone was with the FBI and then it was with the state prosecutors and what possibly could have happened.
Right. And by the
between it going from Michael Cohen to here and them. Go ahead, Tyler.
Oh, sorry, you'd cut out for a bit, so I was just jumping back in and saying, yeah, all these things could have happened along the chain of custody, these links in the chain. And by the way, even manipulation can happen remotely. If it's not in a secured vault, someone can hack into it and mess with it. So I think the message was Michael Cohen's a sketchy guy and his phone is also sketchy. So, calling it into question.
And I think with that, we've come to the top of the hour, so we will leave it there. Anna Bauer, Tyler McBrien, Benjamin Wittes, thank you for joining us today. And thank you all for watching. If you are joining us on YouTube and you want to support Lawfare's coverage of the Trump trials and be able to watch these dispatches without ads, you can become a Lawfare Material supporter at lawfaremedia.org/support. See you all tomorrow for another post-court dispatch.